I am very grateful to you for listening while I talk about the National Federation of Federal Employees, its objectives, and its characteristics. The objectives of the National Federation of Federal Employees are set by delegates sent by the members to our national conventions. Our last national convention in Kansas City in September 1958 decided upon certain objectives which we call our program of progress. While much of that program has been well publicized, I should like to restate some of the major objectives in it. They are protection and strengthening of the merit system, a pay policy which will enable the government to recruit and retain qualified employees, the adjustment of Classification Act salaries on a national basis so that rates of pay will be kept reasonably comparable with those paid outside the government service by progressive employers, a single national wage board plan for wage board employees, longevity increases for wage board employees, an adequate program of medical and hospital insurance for all federal employees, optional retirement after 30 years of service, regardless of age, protection of the civil service retirement system and the retirement fund, repeal of the Whitten Amendment, restoration of full leave privileges. While we must try to attain as many of our objectives as possible, we know that some of them will have a better chance than others. This being true, we plan to put special emphasis on a program for medical and hospital insurance. Such a program is needed by federal employees as a protection for themselves and their families. The government needs it to improve its position as an employer. We're going to urge the best possible medical and hospital insurance program we can get, but at least we do want to make a beginning. We cannot expect to get legislation which will be perfect or as liberal as may be desired. All legislation involves compromise. An uncompromising stand could fail to get any legislation whatever. So we are going to try to get some kind of medical and hospital insurance legislation on the books. At the same time, we shall move forward, whenever possible, on the other objectives set by our 1958 convention. Our 1958 convention, may I say, was one of the best in the 41-year history of our organization. One of the most representative groups of federal officials ever to attend a convention addressed the Kansas City Convention. In addition, hundreds of greetings and special messages were received. There was a message from the President of the United States. There were messages from members of Congress and leading officials in many departments and agencies. The respect, confidence, and esteem in which our organization is held was evident in both the addresses heard and in the messages received. Encouraged by such addresses and messages, and by the fine spirit which pervaded the convention, our organization goes forward, strengthened and inspired to work for its objectives. This spirit of the convention was so apparent, I felt impelled to refer to it in my concluding remarks on the last day of the convention. I said to the delegates, as you go back to your locals, go back to work among the members of your locals, carry with you, if you will, the spirit of your convention. Like Joshua of old, who called the children of Israel together and said to them, choose you this day whom ye will serve, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You say to other folks, choose what road you will, but I have chosen the road to follow the National Federation of Federal Employees because I believe it leads in the right direction. Members, as well as those eligible to become members, can find ground for depth of conviction and firmness of decision in the National Federation of Federal Employees. An organization, like a person, develops a character. It becomes known for certain characteristics which stand out in its patterns of action. The character and the characteristics of an organization are found in its nature, its history, its membership, the patterns of its activities, and the effect of its activities on the situations and problems which confront it. As to its nature, history, and membership, the National Federation of Federal Employees is the oldest and largest general organization of federal employees. It has been successfully active in its field since 1917. It has locals and members in all the 49 states, the District of Columbia, the territories, and in many foreign countries. It includes in its membership both Classification Act employees and Wage Board employees. It has members in the high grades as well as in the low grades. It takes in supervisors and administrative officials as well as employees who are supervised. Among its members can be found scientists, engineers, managers, members of the professions, skilled and unskilled workers, and clerical employees of all categories. The characteristic patterns of action of the National Federation of Federal Employees may be divided roughly into two groups. One consists of those patterns of action which are found within the organization, and the other is composed of those patterns of action which operate outside of the organization. The patterns of action within the organization are those of a democracy. Policies and objectives are established by delegates elected by its members and sent to the national conventions. Each local is entitled to send delegates. Any local may send resolutions to be acted on by a national convention on any subject pertaining to federal employees. At the convention, resolutions are referred to appropriate committees. The committees hear delegates who desire to appear either for or against the resolutions. The committees then submit their recommendations to the delegate body. There the resolutions may be debated by the delegates on the floor of the convention. The decisions are determined by a majority vote. After that, it becomes the responsibility of the national officers to try to get action in conformity with convention decisions. Developments are reported to the membership by means of news bulletins and other communications to the various locals and through our monthly magazine, the Federal Employee, which goes to every member. Locals deal directly with the national office in Washington. There is no intermediate organizational setup to impede communication. The patterns of action which have an effect outside of the organization generally fall into four fields: legislation, consultation, grievances, and public relations. In the field of legislation, the national officers prepare or assist in the preparation of bills to be introduced in the Congress. They also appear before committees of both the Senate and the House of Representatives and testify for or against bills under consideration by such committees. This involves careful preparation of written testimony which becomes a part of the record. The preparation of statements to be made before congressional committees requires judgment, skill in the collection and presentation of facts, and reasoning ability in answering questions asked by the members of the committees. There are occasions when it is highly desirable for the national officers to see individual members of Congress personally, or to write letters to all of them with reference to desired action. At proper times, the national officers alert the officers and members of the locals to write their senators or congressmen and urge their support of particular legislation. In this way, the people back home can give timely expression of their desires to their representatives in the Congress. The National Federation of Federal Employees and its national officers in Washington are registered to carry on this type of legislative activity. They make quarterly reports to Congress as required by law. The legislative activities of the National Federation of Federal Employees are the most far-reaching of all its activities. The primary or basic benefits which federal employees receive and the general conditions under which they work depend on laws passed by the Congress. Such things as pay, leave, retirement, and so forth are obtained through legislative channels, not administrative channels. However desirous an administrative officer may be to increase pay, provide greater leave privileges, arrange for life or health insurance, or any other benefit, he is without authority to grant such benefits. The Congress must be asked for them. This calls for organization to voice the desires of federal employees. It is in the legislative field that the National Federation of Federal Employees plays its most vital role. As to the effectiveness of this legislative activity, we invite anyone to compare what the National Federation of Federal Employees has asked for over the years with what has been accomplished. Most of the legislation that has benefited federal employees during the past 41 years was legislation advocated by the National Federation of Federal Employees. In the field of consultation, the national officers confer with officials of the departments and agencies regarding various programs, such as the promotion program, and suggest such modifications as in their opinion will improve them. In his address to our convention, Mr. Rocco C. Siciliano, Special Assistant to the President of the United States for Personnel Management, in speaking of his conferences with us, stated, quote, "Among the first persons I met after assuming my present position were your national officers, President Owen and Secretary-Treasurer Nolda. Since then, we have conferred often and on many matters of great importance to all federal employees and the federal service. I have been impressed by their constructive and public-spirited approach to these problems, an approach which I know is characteristic of the National Federation of Federal Employees," unquote. In the field of grievances, the pattern of our activity is one of fair, factual, and objective dealing. We first seek to prevent those situations out of which grievances arise. When there is a grievance, we follow established grievance procedures through channels. If a grievance finally reaches the Washington level, we render assistance with a view to obtaining a just decision based on the facts in the case and the proper application of law and regulation. We seek no publicity in this field. We avoid stirring up grievances. We try to work out an adjustment on an informal basis at the initial stage, if possible. We do not handle grievances for non-members. In the field of public relations, activities of the National Federation of Federal Employees follow a consistent pattern. We call it the Truth Campaign. Wherever there appears in the press or other media misrepresentations about federal employees, we combat the misrepresentations with the facts and the truth. This is the most sustained, comprehensive, and effective activity of its kind in the country. I'm glad to say it has substantially improved the climate of public opinion, which must be favorable if employees are to do their best work. It is characteristic of the National Federation of Federal Employees that it fully recognizes that employee management relations in the government service are quite different from those in private industry. Therefore, it adheres to the view that collective bargaining, arbitration, picketing, and striking have no place in the government service. From its earliest history, there has been a provision in its national constitution that it will not engage in or support strikes against the United States government. The National Federation of Federal Employees is independent. It is not affiliated with any national or international labor organization. It in no way comes under the shadow of the power or control of such organizations, but is free to follow its own chosen course of action. The National Federation of Federal Employees stays in its own field. It confines its activities to the betterment of the federal service and the promotion of the welfare of federal employees. It does not engage in partisan politics. The National Federation of Federal Employees resorts to nothing more compelling than common sense, persuasion, and information in trying to achieve its objectives. A signal advantage of this characteristic is that it gets results. The National Federation of Federal Employees looks upon employee relations as human relations, which can be made satisfactory through understanding and cooperation. It does not look on employee relations as an irreconcilable conflict between employee and employer. It envisions, instead of a class struggle, the desirability of human adjustments for mutual benefit. The National Federation of Federal Employees attaches great importance to the loyalty required by the oath of office which federal employees take. In the past, it has been guided by such principles as are expressed in the Code of Ethics for the Government Service recently adopted by the Congress. The objectives and activities of the National Federation of Federal Employees are of vital concern to every federal employee. More and more federal employees, as they think about their place in our national life, are becoming convinced that they need the representation given them by our organization. Illustrative of this realization is the comment of a man who retired early this year from a high executive position in Washington. He commented about the circumstances which led him to join the National Federation of Federal Employees. He said that one day when he was a manager in a field station, he walked out of his office at lunchtime and saw his secretary filling out a check which she was preparing to mail. He asked her about it, and she told him it was a check for her dues in the National Federation of Federal Employees. He questioned her about the organization, what it was, and what it did. She told him. When he later returned to his office, he began thinking about what his secretary had said and about her check to the National Federation of Federal Employees. In doing so, there came to his mind very clearly the thought that his secretary was giving her support to an organization that was greatly benefiting him as well as her. He concluded that since she was supporting an organization which was unquestionably benefiting him, he too ought to support it. Acting on that conclusion, he joined, and for years thereafter has continued to be a member. The National Federation of Federal Employees extends a welcoming hand to all eligible federal employees to join it, support it, and strengthen it. A decision to do so can find a firm basis in the character, the characteristics, the reputation, the past achievements, and the future objectives of the National Federation of Federal Employees.